The wind rolled like a low whistle across the plains, brushing through tall grass and lifting the dust off the wagon trail. The sun hung heavy and golden above the ridges, spilling heat on the endless horizon where nothing seemed to move except the shadows of circling hawks. Mary Lou Turner stood by the half-broken fence behind her father's cabin, her hands rough from work and her heart quieter than she liked to admit. She had known loneliness since the day her mother passed, and it had grown louder after her father's illness kept him tied to bed. Every morning before dawn she would saddle the mule, ride to town for medicine or flour, and be back before the sun hit high noon. It was a routine born of duty, not choice, and though she was barely 20, her eyes had already seen too much waiting and not enough promise. That morning, she heard hoofs, not her mule's slow trot, but a steady, confident gallop, the kind that told you whoever was coming had seen trouble before and wasn't afraid to meet it. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron, and saw him, a man on a chestnut horse, tall in the saddle, hat tipped low, dust trailing behind him like smoke. He slowed near the gate, dismounted, and nodded. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his voice gravel and honey all at once. "Heard there's a ranch up this way that could use a hand." Mary Lou looked him over, boots scuffed, shirt worn thin at the collar, a revolver resting easy on his hip but not threatening. He had that look men got when they'd been alone too long, half wary, half lost. "This ain't much of a ranch," she said, straightening. "Just me and my pa, and he's not been well." The cowboy nodded slowly, glancing toward the house where a single window glowed faintly with the morning fire. "Then maybe it's the right place," he said. "Name's Clay Redin. Used to ride fence for the Barkley spread north of Abilene. Got let go when the cattle ran thin. Figured I'd head west, see what work I could rustle up." Mary Lou hesitated. Strangers didn't come easy out here, and trust came even harder. But she saw something steady in his eyes, not charm or swagger, but plain, quiet steadiness. "We could use help fixing that roof," she said finally. "And the well's been coughing sand since spring. You work honest, I'll feed you." Clay smiled faintly, tipped his hat. "Fair trade, ma'am." By afternoon he had the roof patched tight against the wind and the pump breathing water again. Her father, old Tom Turner, shuffled out to sea. "You the drifter my girl hired?" he rasped. Clay nodded. "Just doing a good day's work, sir." Tom studied him a long time. "Ain't many young men these days who call a day's work good," he said. "You stay a spell, if you want. We pay little, but there's supper and roof enough." That night they ate together under a fading sky, the scent of stew mixing with mesquite smoke. Clay spoke little, just asked about the land, the cattle that once grazed here, and the mother Mary Lou barely remembered. When her father went to bed, she lingered by the fire, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick. Clay looked up from polishing his spurs. "You run this place yourself?" he asked. "Seems that way," she said. "Pa too sick to do much. I just keep it going." "That's more grit than most men got," he said softly. "You keep things alive when the world's gone dry. That's something." She didn't know why those words settled deep inside her. Maybe because no one had spoken to her like that. Not like a girl needing pity, but like a person worth noticing. The next weeks passed slow and steady. Clay fixed fences, broke the wild colt in the barn, and hauled water from the creek when the well gave out again. He never complained, never asked for more than coffee and work. Sometimes Mary Lou caught him looking toward the horizon after sundown, as if listening for something long gone. Once she asked, "You got folks somewhere?" He shook his head. "Had a brother, rode south with a cavalry outfit. Never came back." She didn't press. Silence was its own language between them, and they both understood it. By late summer, the rains came hard. The creek swelled, the roof leaked again, and her father's fever worsened. Clay stayed up nights beside the fire, mixing tonic and helping her cool the old man's head with damp cloths. "You're wasting your time on an old fool," Tom muttered one night, his eyes cloudy. "You ought to be somewhere better, boy." Clay smiled. Don't reckon there's better than where you're needed. Tom grunted, half smiling back. When the fever broke a few days later, he called Mary Lou close and whispered, "That cowboy, he's the sort that don't run when the work turns hard. You do worse, girl, to keep him around." She laughed it off, but her cheeks flushed all the same. Clay started teaching her to shoot the old Winchester, just in case bandits or coyotes came sniffing around. He showed her how to line up the sights, how to breathe before the shot. "Don't close both eyes," he said, steadying her shoulder. "You'll see clearer when you ain't afraid to look." His touch was gentle, guiding, but it left her heart thudding like hooves on packed dirt. When she hit the tin can dead center, he grinned. "Told you," he said. "You just needed someone to show you where to aim." She smiled back, though she wasn't sure whether he was talking about the rifle or something else. By autumn, rumors spread of a gang raiding ranches west of Dry Creek. One night the dogs barked, and Clay stepped outside, gun drawn. 3 riders appeared from the dark, faces masked, demanding food and money. Mary Lou froze behind the door, clutching her father's shotgun. Clay stood tall in the yard, calm as if greeting neighbors. "Ain't nothing here worth stealing," he said. "Move along." One of the men spat. "You think we ride this far for charity?" He raised his gun, but Clay's shot came first, clean and sure. The outlaw fell, the others fled into the night. The next morning Clay buried the body under the mesquite tree, silent as the dawn. When he came back, Mary Lou caught his sleeve. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "So could you," he said softly. "That's why I was out there first." After that night something changed between them, a quiet understanding that didn't need words. He started calling her Miss Lou, half teasing, half tender. She found herself waiting each evening to hear his boots on the porch. Sometimes he'd hum low tunes by the fire, songs about faraway towns and girls with summer eyes. She'd listen from the doorway, her heart tugging at something she couldn't name. One chilly morning, she caught him packing his saddlebag. "You leaving?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked up, his eyes shadowed. "Thought I might ride to town, see about that new herd needing wranglers. Could use the pay." She nodded slowly. "Town's a long ride." "Not so long," he said. "But I'll come back, if you'll have me." That night she sat awake, staring at the empty chair by the fire. The wind moaned through the eaves, and she realized how quiet the world could feel without one person in it. Her father stirred in his sleep, muttering something about her mother's laughter, and for the first time she let herself cry, not for loss, but for something she hadn't dared to want. The next morning she stepped outside just as the horizon blushed with dawn. Clay's horse was tied by the gate. He stood there, hat in hand, eyes soft. "Couldn't ride off," he said simply. "Didn't feel right." She smiled through tears. "Maybe it's because you ain't got anywhere else to be." He shook his head. "Maybe it's because I already am where I belong." Through winter they worked side by side, mending fences, feeding stock, nursing her father when his health waned again. Snow fell thick, muffling the land in silver quiet. On Christmas Eve, Clay carved her a small wooden horse, rough but beautiful. "Ain't much," he said, "but it's yours." She held it like something fragile. "It's everything," she whispered. Her father passed in early spring, peaceful in his sleep. They buried him on the hill beside her mother, wildflowers just beginning to bloom. Clay stood beside her through the whole service, silent, hand steady on her shoulder. When everyone else had gone, he said softly, "You ain't alone, Miss Lou. Not unless you want to be." She turned to him, tears catching the light. "And if I don't want to be?" He took off his hat, eyes deep as riverstone. "Then I reckon you got yourself a man willing to stay, if you'll have him." She smiled faintly. "You proposing, Mr. Redin, ain't good with words," he said. "But if you need in a husband, I'll do." The sentence came out rough, honest, and unpolished, just like him. She laughed through her tears. "You got a strange way of asking." "Maybe," he said, but I mean it plain. They married that summer under the cottonwood tree, just the preacher from town and a few neighbors there to witness. The wind lifted her hair, the sky stretched white and blue, and Clay looked at her like she was the only solid thing in all the shifting world. He built her a porch swing, painted it white, though the paint chipped in the sun within weeks. Every evening they sat together watching the sky bleed gold into purple, her hand resting in his. Sometimes he'd tell stories of the trails he'd ridden, rivers that sparkled like glass, mesas that burned red at sunset. "You miss it?" she'd ask. Sometimes he'd say, "But I got something better now." And he'd glance at her, that small smile tugging at his mouth. Years passed, the land turned green again after the drought. They bought more cattle, mended fences, and raised 2 children, a boy who had his mother's quiet strength and a girl who laughed like her father's songs. Life wasn't easy, but it was theirs. Every so often, Mary Lou would hear someone in town whisper about the old cowboy who settled down for love. She'd just smile. Folks could say what they wanted. They hadn't seen how he looked at her across the supper table, or how he'd rise before dawn to light the fire so the house stayed warm. They hadn't heard the way he said her name, soft and certain, like a prayer. One evening, long after the children had grown, they sat on that same porch, the air thick with the scent of sage and rain. The years had carved lines in their faces but not dulled the light in their eyes. Clay turned to her, his voice low. "Remember the day I came riding up your road?" "I remember," she said. "You looked like trouble." He chuckled. "You weren't wrong." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You still are, maybe," he said, smiling. "But I reckon I did all right, for a drifter." "You did better than all right," she whispered. The sun sank behind the hills, painting the sky in fire and rose. Somewhere in the distance a lark called, lonely and sweet. Clay squeezed her hand. "If I had to do it again," he said, "I'd still ride up that road, hat in hand, same words ready." She smiled. "If you need in a husband," said Cowboy. "That's the one," he murmured. "Still mean it, after all this time." She looked at him, her heart full of every year they'd shared, every storm weathered, every laugh, every quiet night like this one. "And I'd still say yes," she said. The wind moved softly through the grass, carrying their laughter into the coming night, where it lingered. 2 souls who'd found home not in the wide, wild land, but in each other.